Today's presentation is just putting information together in my mind after I watched a YouTube video. The YouTube video is so informative, and as I was watching it, I thought to myself, I should share this with other people because it relates to being able to handle racial situations that we're going to encounter. There's no way around it, unfortunately, until this world changes, and who knows what generation is actually going to change. So instead of waiting on that change, we need to do something about it now for ourselves. So I took some notes first. So I do want to say, I'm not here to tell you how to handle all racist conflicts, but I am here to provide some information to reflect on that can change your perspective about such encounters and provide a space to discuss this topic. But it's just to give you information about a different perspective when it comes to taking things personally and how it relates to racism. And then, other situations in your life that may come up. All right, so what's in front of you is obviously an iceberg. So the iceberg we use in psychology to depict different things. So you may or may not have heard of id, ego, and superego. That's something that's used for it. We also use it for what's conscious, or pre-conscious, or subconscious and unconscious. You can look all that up, later on, but I'm using it for a different reason. So we're going to talk about taking things personally and how we can make a change in our life, our daily lives. So the first thing is what we see. Whenever, say you go on a cruise ship, maybe you see an iceberg. Hopefully you don't, because we've seen Titanic, right? But say you do see it. You see the top part. And so the top part is our behavior. And I'm going to talk more about that and what that looks like. And then what we kind of see but don't see is our state of mind. And I'll get into that as well. And then underneath all of that is our mindset. And then I titled it Melon, but it relates to how we see our culture, how we see Black people. So that's what that last one is about. That's a little bit deeper into our mindset, okay? So let's start with behavior. Behavior is our facial expressions. I'm very expressive with my face, even when I don't talk. So people can sometimes assume what I'm thinking, but they never really know because I don't say anything. But we have to be mindful of our facial expressions when we encounter a racial situation, because somebody could assume something, right? And then we have gestures and actions. Maybe you flip somebody off or you cuss them out. That's where words come in. Or maybe you don't say anything. Maybe you have in the back of your mind, I don't care what people say about my reaction. I'm just not going to say anything because my peace of mind is more important than trying to tell somebody off or something like that. So that's the behavior portion. That's what other people see. And that's what we can use to protect ourselves by how we deal with certain situations. We can protect ourselves by either acting a certain way or behaving a certain way. I don't like using the word acting, but behaving a certain way, or just not behaving at all, not even allowing that person to get a reaction. And every situation is going to be different, right? So some people, they need a reaction and some people don't. So then we go back to our state of mind. So when you think of state of mind, think of in that moment, what is my state of mind? And again, this can be across the board. It doesn't even have to be a racial situation. It can be, what is my state of mind in this moment at this hour? Am I in reasonable mind? Why is my emotional mind? So for those who are not familiar with these concepts, this is from DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. I'm not going to get into what that is, but it's basically for those who have borderline personality disorder. It helps with bipolar disorder as well. Honestly, it helps with a whole bunch of disorders, even if you don't have a disorder. This is just something to keep in mind when you're thinking about your current state, okay? So reasonable mind, I got my list here. Reasonable mind is also considered rational mind. So reasonable mind is basically approaches knowledge intellectually. You focus on the task at hand emotions are not involved at all. You're just focused on the here and now. And is thinks logically and uses past experiences, uses facts and research as well as planning, and very focused. And with this, it's you don't care about the other person's feelings. So this can come up in certain situations where maybe you should care about the other person's feelings, but we'll get to that in a second. Then you have the emotional mind. I'm gonna be 100% with you, right? A lot of times Black people are in their emotional mind. And that's when you see that emotional reaction from that person. I'm not saying it's not, valid, to have that reaction. It's more so be mindful of how you're losing control over yourself and over the situation when that happens. So emotional mind consists of where reason and logic is kind of out the window. It's difficult to think that way. And you use only emotions to make decisions, so you're very reactive. It tells us how we are really doing, how we're really feeling about things. And sometimes we don't get our needs met because we're so emotionally reactive. So what do? So reasonable mind is not always the best way to be. Emotional mind is not always the best way to be. So you end up with wise mind. Wise mind is basically that balance where you want to include both reasonable mind and emotional mind at the same time. And so it can look like, I'm going to tell you how I feel, but I'm not going to necessarily overdo my reaction because I want you to pay attention to my words instead of how I'm responding. I want you to hear my message instead of what I'm showing you. I want you to focus in on the fact that what you just said affected me in a negative way, and I don't want you to do that ever again, okay? Now, that's easier said than done, especially if going back to your current state of mind. If you're already upset about something, and then somebody does something or says something or doesn't do something or doesn't say something, and it's a microaggression, which I'll explain a little bit later, then you're already triggered. You're going to be triggered again, and then emotional mind can take over unless you practice, whether it's meditation or it's something else, so that you can remain in the wise mind during those situations, okay? And I'll be the first one to say that I'm in emotional mind during certain situations where I'm thinking, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have gave that person a reaction. And whereas sometimes I'm in reasonable mind and I'm like, that person deserved a reaction. So being in wise mind is not easy, especially if you're trying to do it 24/7. It's not an easy task, but it is possible. Next is patterns of limited thinking. So patterns of limited thinking is basically what it says. It's basically how a person thinks, and it's limited. It's limiting your ability to be flexible during that situation. And patterns of limited thinking is something that we all do in different ways. There's different types, but today we're going to focus on what's called personalization. And personalization is basically taking things personally. That's the simplest definition. Sometimes personalization gets in the way of us in our decision making, and also it keeps abuse going. So something that I don't think is talked about enough is that Black people are constantly being abused and constantly being mentally and emotionally abused to the point where you feel something. There's an intuition that we have as a people where something's just not right. And somebody could tell you something or dismiss or invalidate what you're saying or thinking, and it makes you feel like, okay, maybe I'm wrong. And then that self-doubt comes in, you start second guessing yourself and things like that. But then also you start to take things personally. Well, that person, they said this about me, and I know something's not right, but someone's telling me something's off. I feel it in my spirit. A lot of people say that. I feel it in my spirit. And your spirit is probably talking to you and telling you, yeah, something's not right. But then a lot of times we listen to other people. And so taking things personally can be difficult because you don't know if, am I right or am I wrong? It's that self-doubt, that second guessing that happens. So here comes the video that I was going to show you all about not taking things personally. There's different strategies that this person talks about, and it's pretty good, and we'll go over the strategies.
Due to copywriting, I'm not going to show you the video here, but I'm showing you how to get there. Type in how not to take things personally in YouTube and it'll come up.
So there are strategies that he went over. I'm going to go over all of them. No need to write them down now because I'm going to copy and paste this to the group chat so that you all can have it. The strategies that he went over for situations is choosing, do I want to be right or happy? So thinking about how your ego plays a role in that situation. The second step, and it's not about me. The third one is shift your focus from me to we, and look at the other person's positive intention, which is sometimes difficult, especially if they did something or said something that was out of line. So if it is to hurt you, whatever they did or said, it has to do with their heart and the negativity that is in their heart, not necessarily about you. And then the next set of strategies is tell yourself over and over, don't take it personally. It's not about me. So say that consistently and often to yourself in your mind. I wouldn't, recommend you say that out loud, but say it to yourself in your head. Next, check how you view yourself. Do you have any self-doubt? Your overall self-concept, your overall self-image, how you think you look, the type of person you think you are. Any core beliefs, negative self-talk that you tell yourself about your life, about your future, and where you come from and all of that. Give yourself empathy for any personal flaws. Nobody is perfect in this world. Even if we strive to this unreasonable perfection, strive to get there, nobody's perfect. So acknowledging the flaws that you have, that everyone else has, and, especially empathy towards and compassion towards yourself, and then being vulnerable and speak up about how you think and feel. So when you do this, speaking to the other person, when you do this, it makes me think this. It makes me feel this. That way they can't say, well, I didn't know, which is a common thing when somebody's apologizing for their racist behaviors. So one thing that stuck out to me in that video was the last quote. The last quote said, people may attack you, criticize you, or ignore you. They can crumple you up with their words, spit you out, or even walk all over you. But remember, whatever they do or say, you will always keep your value. So I wanted to know what stuck out to you all and why that may have stuck out to you.
So I think something I took from that was not putting or taking the negativity of someone else onto yourself.
Yeah.
Because I think, when you're taking things personally or trying not to take things personally, like that's really what it's about. It's about protecting yourself.
True. But that's really hard.
It really is. But I think when you say, okay, this is not about me, this is about that other person, because there's countless examples of that. Like, I don't know if you guys heard the story about the woman downtown who was attacked by a bunch of Trump supporters. That happened on Wednesday. So like that had nothing to do with her. That was something with those people, and any of these racial epithets and stuff like that. Like those people have been protesting in my area, and it's like the same thing, like I'm not going to take this on myself. Like there's something wrong with you guys.
Yep. And you bring up a good point, because we know in our mind, in our spirit, in our hearts that there's something going on with that individual to hate a group of people they don't know and not having any reason to. And it's kind of like that bullying behavior where I'm going to bully you because there's something going on with me and I don't like you for whatever reason. It could be jealousy, yes, but it could be something else too that's not acknowledged publicly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one thing that stuck out to me was kind of looking at somebody's intentions, I guess, before you take it all on you as far as carrying like an emotional burden. Because I've had instances where I've dealt maybe with someone that wasn't the most soft-spoken, or they might be more crass with their words. So
Mhm.
kind of looking at, okay, what is it that they want? What is it that we both want out of the situation? And kind of going from there, I think is helpful. Just because it's easy to kind of have a gut reaction like, oh, I feel like they don't like me. But if you focus more so on the goal, you can kind of remove yourself from the situation. And then, if the end result is that you just don't engage with that person anymore, or you take a break, then that's, what it is. But yeah, I think looking at intention is important.
Very true. Especially now, I think there's a lot weighing on people, given 2020 and such. I think there's a lot weighing on people that it's going to come out. Like, what is your intention during this interaction with me? And let's focus on that goal instead of all the extra stuff. We talked about mindset, basically those strategies, and I'll definitely put it in a group chat, the strategies that we went over. So the second part is, or the last part, not the second part, I don't know how I said that. The last part is us, who we are. So a book that I'm reading right now, this book is extremely worth reading. It's a really good book. As a therapist, I'm using it. And then, personally, it helps too. It's called The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. It is by Dr. Rita Walker. She's an African-American professor. And I was able to do a webinar with her, and she talked about the book. She talked about, one, how she didn't want to put mental health on the title because there's a stigma behind it within the Black community. And also how she writes the book, it's how she talks. And I think that's why I like it so much. And then also she talks about different components of mental health. So whenever somebody thinks about mental health, they think about just diagnosis, and that's not it. That's just part of mental health. And so it's a very well written book, and I'm only like halfway through it. And I'm going to read some passages from it to get you all thinking about different things. Some of this is long, some of it's short. But this first part is about self-doubt and unconscious biases that others may have, or even you may have. It says, the title is "You Can Access Wakandan Energy by Being Who You Are." It says, my research is part of a consistent body of work that insists Black people generally do better when connected to their own culture. Being connected to your Africanness is good for your well-being and also good for children's self-esteem and success in school. It is not a direct cause and effect, but a good sense of self seems to be correlated with success in life. They go together. And then it says, here's how it works. Say you are really good at baking cakes. You know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are good. Someone comes along and says your cakes aren't that good. You might think, maybe this cake didn't come out the best, but I know I can show out in the kitchen. Now, imagine that you're a so-called kind of cook, but you were asked to bake for the church anniversary. You overhear someone saying your cake was dry. It bothers you because you didn't believe that you were a good cook anyway. So it's about how you see yourself. So if someone were to say something to the effect of, and we're going to get into microaggressions in a little bit, but if somebody were to say something like, you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl or something like that, that wouldn't affect you if something in your mind says something was wrong with being dark-skinned. And you have to check yourself when it comes to that and realize, actually, dark-skinned women got some great complexions. And a lot of people hate on dark-skinned women because of that. So noticing what you were taught as a child, even as an adult, and checking that for yourself, so you're not affected by it when somebody says something to you. And then this kind of goes on about teachings as a child. Now, this actually explains what I just said. Anyways, now let's imagine that you secretly believe that you are not as Black as your darker skinned siblings because of your complexion. Because they tease you relentlessly as a child, you have always struggled with your identity. Though your mother chastised them for teasing you, she never talked to you or your siblings about the many beautiful complexions of African people. When the guy at the bar makes an unexpected comment about how he usually likes women with a darker complexion, you bristle for reasons you cannot explain. On the other hand, if you know that your lighter complexion says nothing about who you are, his ignorance, keyword is ignorance, is meaningless. And then it says if a Black child does not have a positive Black identity to navigate his or her world, he may encounter considerable emotional turmoil. So it's important, like there's nothing we can do about our childhood because we're adults, but anything that we didn't get as a child, we can get it as an adult. We have a responsibility to ourselves to do that. And so if your identity it wasn't a healthy teaching that you received as a child when it came to your identity, it is your obligation, your responsibility to take care of that and recognize the beauty in you, inside of you and the outside of you. She talks about, there's another section in her book, it says, why reclaim? Because your identity was stolen and it's time to get you back. And she talks about Auntie Maxine and how she talked about reclaiming her time. But I'm going to read a passage. It says, the core reason why racism has been so destructive is that it denies who we are. As a result, we label individual acts of brilliance and success as Black girl magic or Black boy joy, rather than embracing that this is who we are when not regulated to the boot of oppression. Over time, you gave up your own mind by assuming that if you could fit into white people's world, you would be a better person. You passed this on to your children. You didn't intentionally communicate that white is right, but you kind of did. As a result, your children show up in places like her classroom, suggesting that they're just American, believing that there is limited value in being seen as Black and that Blackness is a liability. So again, she's a professor, so that's who she's speaking about. So any thoughts about any of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, to celebrate Blackness and to cultivate like Black consciousness, because I feel like that's the beginning of healing. At least it was that for me. Like growing up, I wasn't exposed to a lot of Black people, so I didn't really have any like positive examples or any examples for that matter. And when I finally found like Black people and was able to build relationships and friendships with Black people, it really helped me heal and it really helped me find my space. So I think that's like super important.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because I was going to go to a HBCU, but the HBCU that I was going to go to lost their accreditation, whatever, when I was applying. So then I was told that I need to stay in state, so by my parents. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll go to this school that's predominantly white. And I chose to go to that school as a secondary choice because I want to know what, and I hate to say it this way, but how the enemy thinks. I want to know what they know so that I can bring that information back to people that look like me, that need this information. So I didn't go to a HBCU, and that was within, there was an intention in doing so. It's nothing against HBCUs at all. I just did it intentionally, given, my history or whatever. And I like the fact that I did it that way because I did learn a lot. I did learn a lot about myself and how others saw me just by looking at me, knowing nothing about me. And so I learned how to deal with those, those situations. But what I missed out on is having that identity, that Black identity, being uplifted, being empowered and things like that. And I had to do it myself instead of having a community do it for me. The only thing that got me through it was the fact that I grew up in a predominantly Black community where everybody around me was predominantly Black through grade school. So by the time college came, it was very difficult. But because I had that ingrained inside of me, I made it through. And I still continue to read and, obviously through our group chats, listen to the different conversations and connect with other Black people so that I can keep that going, keep my spirit going, and feel welcomed. So again, that's from the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health by Dr. Rita Walker. And she touches on microaggressions. Microaggressions, they are overt, in other words, visible or apparent, and there's covert, hidden or concealed, racially charged behaviors that can occur throughout the day for an African-American individual. Notice it says throughout the day. And that's something that people don't, that's not Black. And I'm not talking about, just white people. I'm talking about other people of color as well. So that other people that are not Black, I don't think they really understand that throughout the day, that's something that's happening to us, whether we recognize it or not. Covert behaviors and microaggressions, which are subtle and offensive comments or behaviors directed at a marginalized group, specifically a racial minority group, that can be intentional and or unintentional, that reinforces stereotypes about that specific marginalized group. Again, this information is from Dr. Rita Walker's book. And so some examples are, I don't see you as Black. You are pretty for a Black girl. Do you work here while you're shopping at a grocery store with no ID, indicating that you work there, and clearly you don't work there, and are asking you, where do you get your weed from? When there's a stereotype, it's probably not happening in California, but there's a stereotype that all Black people smoke weed. I'm sure we already know what microaggressions are, but sometimes when those situations happen, people can say, oh no, they were just playing with you, or no, don't take it personally because that's not what they meant. That was not their intention. Or maybe they did do it and then because they apologized, you should just accept their apology. And I, for one, no. I just learned who you are and your level of ignorance, so I can either choose to keep you in my life or I can choose not to. And I'm probably going to choose not to have you in my life. So then we want to speak a little bit about generational trauma. So this is one of the books that's in, I believe it's in one of the reading groups, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. If you haven't read this book yet or don't have it, it has a lot of historical information in it. It's very heavy text, and it's something worth reading and sharing with your family, even if, because without going into history, even if your family is separated for, whether it's mentally or physically separated because of our lovely history, still recommend the book to family members and friends, because it's worth reading and talking about during family discussions, if you have family discussions. And it talks a lot about generational trauma and how it affects us individually. And the other book, the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health, it talks about generational trauma too. And sometimes we have to not allow people from previous generations within our family to keep this generational trauma going. And that means we have to educate ourselves, do more work than they did because of the situations we're in. We have to break the cycle somewhere. And that includes by talking to others about it, by reading books more about generational trauma and our community as a whole. And I think that you all took a good step in doing that by, you know, coming to this presentation. And for those who are in that reading group, I think it's over, but for those who are in that reading group for the other book, that's taking a step as well in educating yourself. So, any thoughts or questions about anything? That's the end of my presentation, but I just had one last question. But wanted to check in. Any thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I have one thought. Thanks for having this and, you know, educating us and giving us this space to learn how to, you know, better handle different situations. I think one thing that I've taken from 2020 and going into 2021, just trying to make sure I'm doing what's best for me. So making sure that no matter what argument, discussion, whatever it may be that I may get into, that I'm trying to protect my energy and, you know, go about it in the most responsible way. So I think it's nice to kind of have these tools in our back pocket, you know, in case somebody wants to try something or maybe it's just not our day, but it's nice to be able to respond differently than lashing out and playing into stereotypes, but kind of giving people a one-up on us. So thanks.
Oh, you're very welcome. And sometimes the best response is no response at all. So if you know somebody is intentionally trying to hurt you, you can just say, oh, okay. And then just leave the room. That will piss them off. And they may even come after you and say, no, I'm trying to make you upset, or, you know, whatever case may. Okay. And you could still be getting upset. But I don't know, I can't speak for everybody else, but when I see somebody that's trying to come after me get upset because it's not affecting me, they're not getting the reaction that they want, it makes me feel less angry, and it helps me get through the situation. And then I can either stop the conversation. I have more control. Either I can stop the conversation, or I can just say, what's your goal? What are you trying to do with this conversation? Where are we going? Are we going anywhere? We're not? Okay. Well, I'm going to go. I need you not to follow me. Have a good day. And our new vice president, she showed this. I love her facial expression with Pence, with him. I love her facial expression because she's like, okay, it's my time to speak. It's my time to speak. Like, I don't know. I just love that one clip of her speech during the debates. But either way, we do need tools to help us be Black in America. It sucks, but we do need these tools to help us through. And we should no longer allow people to bully us into doing what they say or making us feel bad of who we are, when we know deep down inside, like, there's nothing wrong with me. Actually, I'm the shit. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. But if you're constantly being told that there's something wrong with you, after a while, you could start believing it, unless you remind yourself of who you are. And it's all about reminding yourself of who you are. Any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I agree with Carson. It's very important to have these tools in your back pocket, because we encounter these situations all the time, whether it's the workplace, you know, shopping, getting groceries, even within the home. You know, sometimes our family can say things that are not always really beneficial. So I definitely think this has been really helpful for me.
Good. And it really sucks when it's in the family, especially if there's a family with different complexions. Like, some people, they say things that they may not even necessarily mean harm, but they're causing more harm than good. And that's really unfortunate. So I have two more questions. I'm going to just say them both together. You can answer whichever one you want. The first one is, how could you or someone else, someone you know, encountering a racially charged situation, use this information when handling such a situation? Second question is related. How do you see yourself using this information in any other domain in your life? So other relationships with family members, maybe like if you're out dating someone, interactions at the grocery store or anything like that. How could you use this information even outside of if it's not related to being Black?
I guess if it's not related to being Black, just kind of taking the time to express your emotions, but to be vulnerable and, let somebody know that maybe something they said hurt you, or something they said made you feel a type of way. So, like, especially for Black women, stereotypically, people think we lash out, but I think even like in business, working with different coworkers or clients, it's good to be able to see what their intention is, because hopefully there's a common goal of whether it's improving the business, whatever it is, there is a common goal there. So I think it helps in that sense too.
Mm-hmm. Again, changing me to we. So that's really good. One thing that stuck out a couple of weeks ago, I was in a webinar. It said racial microaggressions overlooked by you can be a risk factor for post-traumatic stress disorder, and it can be ongoing. And this is something that's constantly overlooked. When people think of PTSD, they think of they may think of the military, they may think of some type of like sexual or physical abuse, but something that keeps trauma going is one, when we were constantly having to watch the different shootings that happen in the media, having to see someone that looks like us die and nobody do anything about it. And that's one of the reasons why that self-care message was sent out, be mindful of how much negativity you're bringing into your home, meaning how much news you're watching. Sometimes it's okay to just, turn that off. You don't always have to be in the know. You have to be mindful of, yourself. And so we're constantly, in a way, being traumatized by these different situations, and it can increase our reactivity. And some people, they're so tired, they're so burnt out, so exhausted that they don't even respond anymore. And so be mindful of that as well, both extremes. And make sure that, going back to the presentation, make sure you're in that wise mind more often than the other two, because we have to, protect ourselves. We have to protect our peace, our energy at all times, because you never know when somebody will try and like get you off of your balance, your scale, So make sure to do daily check-ins with yourself. If you want to, other people, and you have the capacity to do that with other people, and ask other people to check in with you too. You don't have to take all of this on your own, especially as Black women. People don't understand how much we take on ourselves. But some of the stuff, we choose to do that, and we don't have to. We can say no. But it's part of our culture to say, okay, I got you. But who has us, So any lasting thoughts before we end?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point with the news. I know with everything that's going on, like I have friends that are persons of color, but they're not Black, and they're constantly reaching out and they want to have conversations around current events, and it gets hard. Even just constantly hearing messages like, "Oh, that's so messed up," and "I can't believe that's happening," and it's like after a while, it's draining. It's like I know you have good intentions, but you just get tired of it.
Right.
I know work when when that incident happened, I think it was on Monday, when they stormed the Capitol. I know that at work, my boss actually turned the TV on and watched it. And I watched it for a little bit, then I went back to work. And because it wasn't, I didn't feel comfortable watching it. I felt a little triggered. I felt uncomfortable. And so I just went back to work and I stayed focused on doing my job and not on what was happening on TV, because it just wasn't I don't discuss politics at work. So I felt like I had to protect myself by getting away and just doing my job and staying focused and not getting emotional and not getting caught up in what was going on. So I was just listening to your presentation about being emotional and being being wise, and that was absolutely what I was trying to do at the time. Just stay not get emotional, just stay focused and protect myself and stick up for myself. I don't want to discuss politics. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you for sharing that. And I don't think people are being mindful of, the work environment. There are certain things you shouldn't have to deal with in a work environment. And I think people are, I don't know, people just aren't thinking right now. But that's good for you that you recognize that it was triggering you, and then the second thing is you did something about it, because that's what we have to do to protect our energy and our peace, our overall well-being. We have to recognize, okay, this is a trigger for me. I need to do something about it, and I need to do something about it now, not later. And if you need to have that conversation, if you want to, you need to have a conversation with whomever, like saying like, this made me uncomfortable. Can we not do this at work? You could do that too, or you could not do that. It's about you recognizing what is going to be good for me. What are my needs, and what is it that I need to do to make sure my needs are being met without, being selfish, obviously. So good for you. That's really good.
Yes, because at work, it's like I'm only Black person there, so it's like I'm viewed politically as what they see me as, in the news. So they want to unleash and discuss politics because they think I represent the Democrats, and they already know my viewpoint and they want to, debate. But I don't. I just tell them I don't discuss politics at work, and that stops that. But yes, so I have to protect myself that way, because I already know that they don't know me as me. They just see me as, the Democrat. And so yes, I have to protect myself from that as well, because it's so exhausting to go to work and then have to debate. For them, it's just an exercise. For me, it's completely exhausting. And, you don't want to get emotional. So.
Yeah, you bring up a really, really good point. It's also about respecting you, too. And if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to talk about it. And a lot of times, and I'm going to relate to being a woman, a lot of times we feel the need to explain ourselves. I don't even have to explain to you. I don't want to talk about it, so don't bring it up. All right, I'm going to go back to work. And, leaving it at that. But then, even when we do that, sometimes we feel guilty. Dang, I was too hard on them. Maybe I should explain. No, you shouldn't. You said what you said. There's no need to explain yourself. I don't talk about this. Like Lauren was saying, it's exhausting to me. To you, it's an exercise. And you get to go back to your, whatever you're doing, and you get to go home. But I carry this weight with me day in and day out.
Yes.
So you're disrespecting me right now. I said what I said. Leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
But then some people are like, okay, well, you're being too dramatic. No, you're dismissing what I'm saying. So now it's turning into harassment. And then
Yes.
we can go that way. If you want to, we can go that way, or you could just stop. You can just leave me alone. And it doesn't matter who they are. It can be an employee, the same level as you, or it can be a boss. It doesn't really matter. Respect me while I'm at work. So yes, please make sure to protect yourself at all times, because who else is going to protect us? And I really hate to say,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who else is gonna protect us?
We have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a big one because with everything that's going on, not only is it triggering, it's traumatic. And then to have these conversations with people who you know don't really care, but they're doing this for their own entertainment or to satiate their egos, it's even more traumatic. You know, like, don't bring these conversations to me when you don't care and you're not trying to learn. And I recently had to learn I am not the spokesperson for all Black people. And it's not my job to educate you. Like, at this point, like, if you're racist or ignorant, like, you're that way for a reason. And
Yep.
it's not for me to try to, like, change you. Now, if someone comes to me and they really want to know, they really want to have a conversation, like, I'm here for it. But just for you to feel some kind of way, I'm not going to go there with you. I'm not going to give you my energy.
And that you bring up that, especially that last part, you bring up, I'm not giving you my energy. You're taking something from me. Are you going to give it back? Probably not.
No.
Exactly. Like, you're not going to walk away from this situation informed or any better, and neither am I.
Nope. It's waste time. Waste time and energy.
I agree with that point, especially I think just what's been going on, regardless of, political affiliations, but I think there's been a lot of nuance that's been left out of, certain conversations. And, you do get into those situations where you become the spokesperson, so to speak, like whether you lean one way or the other, you in some way become a spokesperson. And we're not a monolith, so we have different viewpoints, of course, which is acceptable. But I think the issue that I have is it seems regardless of someone's view, it's this constant state of, oh, I'm ready to fight. I'm ready to, give my energy to this debate. I'm ready to go. And, like, I have things that I don't agree with in other areas, of course, but I'm not going to fight with you about it. We can agree to disagree. We can have a healthy conversation and learn from each other. But I just feel we need to kind of step back from putting our energy towards fighting and, being defensive, because just as a Black woman, it doesn't look good anyway on our end. But, like, it's exhausting, like what you were saying, and Catherine and Lauren were saying, it's exhausting to have to feel that you need to defend yourself all of the time. And, sometimes we want to break too. Like, sometimes I just want to watch my shows and I don't want to talk about politics. I don't have to. Like, I can choose to step away from the conversation if I want to. So, like what Lauren's saying, it's good to be able to kind of have that agency over yourself to say, this isn't for me, and I'm gonna just remove myself from the conversation and, leave it at that.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. It is exhausting, really exhausting. And sometimes we don't realize how exhausting it is until we can't get out of bed because we're so exhausted. And we're like, whoa, why do I feel this way? Am I sick? No, you're exhausted. You're drained because of everything that has been going on. There's a comedian, I don't know his name, but there's a comedian, I saw one of his skits and he was talking about how, and it was actually pretty funny. He's a Black guy. He was talking about how, dear white people, how Jerome is with you at work. That's not how Jerome really is. He's code switching with you. And if you really want to see how Jerome is, catch him outside, because that's not really how he is. And I'm like, that part, like, we have to be a certain way. It's kind of like we have to leave our Blackness at home because people don't know how to deal with it. It's not because we want to, it's because people don't know how to deal with it. And if they deal with it a certain way, we're going to get triggered. And it's like a means of protection. And some people would bring up the fact, well, that's when you either work for yourself or work in an environment where you can be yourself. And that's not always possible because depending on like your interests and things like that, but it's just something to think about as well.
Yeah, they're not used to being around black people. They're not used to blackness, but we have to get used to the whiteness or the Asian or Hispanic or whatever other culture. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's cold in here. Why is it?
And that's not fair to us, but I mean, let's be honest. Black people are trying to look for fairness. We're not getting it. We're just not. So we need to make certain changes in our lives, in our communities, where we can at least be fair to one another and still maintain our self-image, our self-concept of who we really are, and staying true to our culture. But there are people who disagree with that thought, so I'm not going to like force my thoughts onto you all, but it's just something to, think about as well, to always, protect yourself.